Hi everyone, delonewolf here. Welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And when it comes to EVE news, well, I would say it's all been about the celebration for the Galente Federation last week. I think it was pretty cool. The war ended, so I managed to go out there and explore all of that a little bit. So far, I've actually done all of these parades. Just go take a look at them. Make sure you've got a festival launcher and some fireworks with you, launch them at the Titan, and there you go, you get some extra skill points. And then these expeditions, I've actually run a couple of them solo. It's decently doable for the smallest ones to finish that solo in a venture, but I also tagged along on a group of 2 other players. There was venture and a combat ship that were running them, and once we got into a rhythm basically, and there's always a chat channel that shows up as well, where I just said, all right, I'm at 4k, I'm at 6k, we both bring back the ores. We managed to get the best rewards for those for quite a few of these smallest expeditions. That was actually pretty damn fun and pretty rewarding, of course, at that pace, because you're way faster when there's 2 of you mining than when you're doing it completely solo. But yeah, pretty good week, I would say, with the Galente Federation holidays or festivities, you could say, at this point. And there's stuff for PvPers as well. If you want to get into the proving ground, it's all about Galente ships and things like that. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty fun so far, and we will see what else comes along, of course, as CCP develops the game. I'm basically fully expecting to later down the line get a celebration period for Amar, Minmatar, and for Kaldari. And well, the war is over, and I have jump clones in all of these spaces, so I can normally take part in all of them. We'll see how it goes. Next up, quick look at the New Eden store as always. Let's see if there's anything special happening here. We just have some bundles front and center. New is now called, oh, there we go, DOS Ruvener's Request skin for the Hecate, for instance. There's a sale on that new DOS Ruvener's Request skin for the Nyx, so definitely a unique one. Not if you look at it on the Nyx here and on the Thanatos, it's got like a dark side and then a more brightly colored side. It's interesting, definitely unique, and that one is marked as new together with the Green Demons skin bundle, also for Galente ships. So if I look at that, probably couple of battleships and a couple of cruisers. 500 plex, that's a pretty steep price point once you start to go for a month sub, but alright. So there's a couple new skins, definitely again Galente flavored, and 12-month Omega plus a free skin. Probably, if I look at it from this Green Demons skin bundle, that's pretty cool, but you do have to pony up basically 5,500. Oh, and then you get the skin bundle. Yeah, alright. Well, so that means that you can get these skins basically for free if you decide to sub for another year to EVE Online through your Plex. That could kind of explain why Plex prices are going up. Quick look at the services, so it's that same sale that's showing up, and there's also a sale happening actually for 12 months Omega at the time of recording, so you can either choose 12 months for 11-month price, or I think most would then take the skin bundle if you're gonna invest in that anyways. But alright, why the hell? No, actually, who would not take this? Oh, this is not, that's alright. Maybe they could put that one at 5k then. Who would not take this one then for the sale, of course? 12-month Omega for 5,500 plex. Oh, and that's the general discount, of course. Normally it's 6,000 plex. If you go for 12 months in one go, it's always 5,500 plex. Alright, that makes more sense. But yeah, it's all about the Galente Federation. As a Galente pilot on my main, that's pretty cool. Let's move on to the market itself then. As always, we'll start with plex and stuff, and that's coming in at 430. Like that. Alright, and let's take a look at that. We'll start as always with the chart, and you can see that we've now been doing a climb really out of the rut, and that the upwards trend does seem to be somewhat confirmed. This time we're hovering at 2.5 million, which is a price point that we haven't seen in around 4 months, almost 4.5 months. So that is definitely a bit of a recovery from the bottom at 2.2 million ISK, and in fact in Jita itself we're selling at almost 2.7 million, buyers are just below 2.5, and in the player-owned trade hubs, we go down to just below 2.6 million, with the buyers going up towards 2.5 million. So volumes must at the moment still be dominated by the buyers, so people apparently selling plex to these buyers creates these average prices still below 2.5 million. But yeah, sellers are pushing these prices up, and eventually, apparently in small shifts that last maybe a week or so, we keep getting pushed up 100,000 disk here from 2.2 and was a bit fast here to 2.4, but at 2.3 went to 2.4, and now we're back at the 2.5 million price point. So a decent recovery, and on this chart, on this 1 year chart, we're basically coming to the low end of what I would consider to be a normal average price point for plex. Historically speaking, of course, we're probably at decently low prices. If you just look at maybe the last couple of years, well, everything has changed substantially, of course, when it comes to ISK generation, resources, and things like that. So yeah, plex at the moment in recovery. Then we have the multiple pilot train certificates that are, well, trying to confirm that trend. I would say a weird data point here going at 1.46 billion. Is making a little bit of a mess at the chart, but even today's averages back above 1.3 billion. So sellers are at 1.3 billion, couple of them just below, and then buyers are at 1.2 billion. Clearly here we have that same trend going away from the bottom back towards, well, a more average price on this 1 year chart. Volumes, of course, for multiple pilot train certificates, nothing compared to plex, but at the moment, you know, we're still seeing that upward trend here as well. Skill extractors should have a very similar chart, yeah, back above 290 million ISK, and here again getting closer to that 300 million right around average. So we are talking almost 290 for the sellers, 285 million for the buyers. That is a very narrow margin for something that has basically gone up from around the 255 range to 290 over the last couple of months, and still now these buyers again are being forced up and up by the sellers. That's pretty impressive actually, and yeah, that was a very nice little trade. I didn't really take part in that because I have a decently good stash of plex, but this is very cool. And then of course this should eventually have its impact on the injectors, which at least up to last week have just gone down and down. So here is the chart for the large scale injectors, and you can see that finally the market is saying, well, maybe we should stop this straight roller coaster down from 730 million ISK to 570, and it's apparently at that 570 million mark that the market is starting to hesitate, where we're starting to bounce up and around that price range. 584 million for the sellers, 555 million for the buyers though. So the buyers are still buying well below this chart at around the 555 to 560 range or something like that. Volumes are still quite respectable, and yeah, remember that turnover here for plex. At the moment, it is true, you're getting a lot of skill points from CCP. It's summertime, we're seeing activity decline, so there's probably a lot less motivation for players to go and grab a lot of skill injectors. I think as well, with all of the rebalancing and the changes from CCP, there's quite a bit of hesitation to say I'm going to invest in a lot of large skill injectors and make myself a carrier pilot or Rorcal pilot or something like that, which used to be very big boost for these large scale injectors. But you never know what's coming on the horizon, of course. If CCP were to come out with something that would require skill points, new ship lines, things like that, and we could see a pretty big turnaround from these large scale injectors that could really take advantage of both aspects. Number one, what I would call the protection against inflation, which is of course the plex / skill extractor part of these skill injectors, and then of course the general demand for skill points. If that picks up for any reason, this could be you know, a very interesting bottom range. To me, it does feel like here the market's not really willing to go any lower, but as always, be careful. Don't decide to put every single ISK you got into large scale injectors. I would slowly look into it, and if you feel like this is an investment you want to make, you could definitely, in my opinion, considering this chart, consider making it. The small skill injectors though, they are giving us a little bit more of a warning sign, as they are continuing to decline even on the 5-day moving average that is still keeping, you know, that pace over the 20-day moving average. So we're basically still down 20 days straight at a pretty relentless pace, but it might just be that a 120 million range is where the market will have that same effect of a round numbers in markets do tend to have a bit of a psychological effect, and so we may see some resistance. Oh, I should look. Oh yeah, we saw that, right? 555 million for those buyers. And so let's take a look at the buyers and sellers of small scale injectors. 116 million for the sellers, so it's not going to be a 120 million resistance barrier, and 110 million for the buyers. Man, these buyers, not that much to go until we're below 100 million, so that could really be the price point where small scale injectors decide to settle down. It could go as low as 100 million. If I look at how few buyers are they in big in volume, they're not even big in volumes, right? Just a dozen small scale injectors, and you're looking at buy orders below 95 million. That is going to push sellers way below that, and that could be a little bit of a warning for the large scale injectors, who are of course basically just a multiplicative in the end of these small scale injectors. So be careful. First sign of hesitation in the larges, but the smalls I think are pointing towards potentially an even lower bottom. Then we've got the daily alpha or of course, if you maybe I should quickly mention that, of course, if you're expecting the exact opposite to happen, then the small scale injectors may have a little bit of a recovery bounce to make up for the lost ground compared to the large scale injectors. So it's difficult to know exactly how this is going to play out, of course. Then we've got the daily alpha injectors, continuing to make their way back towards 45 million just a couple of days ago, and hovering around that 42.5. Really decently impressive, especially I would say considering the lower average numbers that we're seeing because of, in my opinion, summertime, the pandemic rules that are significantly changing. So people are definitely starting to do other stuff than sit behind their computers. We're back at 43.5 million for the sellers, 37, almost 38 million for the buyers. So I would say that for alpha players, free-to-play players in EVE Online, that there's probably a turnover in those, of course, but that daily alpha injector I think is a very effective hook for these types of players. I'm sure that CCP has the actual metrics. The one thing to note though is, of course, this right here, we are seeing a decline in volumes. I think that could be very much in line with slightly lower activity, and here look at that, compared to the last summer we're definitely way lower in numbers. Then we've got the hypercores to end this category, that is doing a pretty massive jump up to 300,000 ISK, 285,000, bit of a pullback from that high, but still definitely up for the week, and then 270,000 almost, well 250 for most actually, for the buyers of hypercores. Very interesting, volumes up a little bit. There's definitely been a couple of days where volumes have been trending up, and then we've got a little bit of a peak here at above 100,000 units. I'm not sure. There could be a couple of explanations. Maybe there's been like a big event somewhere where perhaps a big alliance or something like that decided, well, we're gonna do some hypernet raffles, or perhaps someone has been doing some big sales, maybe needing a break for the summer or something like that. What's also possible is that this is speculation or maybe a leak, who knows these days, of course. You never know about what could be happening with the keys, right? I still think that if there's anything that is going to push this category up substantially and in a volatile way, it is getting all the information about the nullsec bank keys, because that could be a very big flood of ISK into the game that should push or drive prices up, especially in this category. So that's something that may be happening as well. I don't know, but this is a very noticeable move back to an above average price for the year here for the hypercores. Next up, we've got the minerals at 1420. Like that, as always, we'll start with titanium, continuing to basically hover at that 4.5 to 5 ISK price range. I do think that we have to accept that under the new circumstances, the new industry rules, this is going to be the place for titanium. 480 for the sellers, 448 for the buyers. And so I would personally, if I'd be mining, and I'm actually mining a little bit, although I'm compressing, but if you're creating titanium, I would say the closer you get to 5 ISK, the closer you're at this point to a no-brain sale. the closer you get to 4.5 ISK, you know, the more likely it is that it's a good idea to hold on to your titanium. I do think that considering the last month or so, this seems to be the price range that titanium is going to trade at. Then we've got pyrite continuing to slowly decline, but definitely stabilizing above 15 ISK here on this one. 17 for the sellers, 16.49 for the buyers. That's a pretty narrow margin. I would say here, unfortunately, yeah, just, you know, if you make it and you need the ISK, definitely sell. I don't see any real reason, especially with the summertime, of course, for pyrite to go back to the 20s, 25, 20, 30 ISK even. I don't think that's in the books any time soon. Then we've got the Mexalon chart that is also finally stabilizing, you could say, but of course this one is coming from a crazy 200 ISK for Mexalon, and even here at that start of the chart at just above 75 ISK is still a very good price historically speaking. This is not one of the minerals that has suffered a lot from the resource bonanza, and as it only knew gains and very high prices throughout the whole you know, CCP reducing availability phase of the game, which is pretty much last year and well, maybe half a year or more before that. And as a result, here now we are declining below 75 ISK for Mexalon. We're stabilizing at a 66.5 for the sellers, above 60 ISK for the buyers, and especially now again with summertime and all of that stuff, I would say that if you're making Mexalon and you want to sell, it doesn't make a lot of sense, I think, to hold on to the stuff that you're producing at the moment. Then we've got Isogen that is making its way back above 50, and then a little bit of downwards pressure here. Perhaps a little bit of a different story, of course. We're at almost 54 ISK for the sellers and almost 50 ISK for the buyers. So this is definitely, you know, should be seen as a counter trend over the last month or so, going from 40 to well above 50 ISK. And here, you know, this is still my read. The problem is that we're still getting them. Here is 158 million that's going to create resistance at 53.78. That seller has probably been up here for like 50 days or so. But the good news is, we're bouncing up against that, right? We've got some sellers below this, and there's still a 25 million order here as well. So there's still some players with big volumes that are you know, selling their Isogen, trying to get the best price, but there is also a little bit more patience that is starting to build in those, and as a result, you know, I do think that basically the current supply-demand situation would be way more balanced if it wasn't for these big volumes. And they're still in the waiting, of course. You know, 26 million here at 56, then another 15 million at 59. And you can see here that basically some of these big holders are already setting up their orders, although some of them will eventually go through the 90-day mark. But you know, they're ready to unload their stocks, and rather than what we've seen that has basically kept us in range for like 3 months straight, or even longer here. I think what has really kept us from getting to that 50 ISK price range was a 1.8 billion unit sell order that showed up all of a sudden, was there for a very long time, and that was of course way too much. Now at one point that order was just gone, and this is now finally you know, with the April rush, giving us a little bit of that feeling that I got, and that I was constantly expecting, where we're slowly now visibly starting to nibble at all of those reserves. So there's very little motivation, I would say, at the moment to go out there and to make Isogen from Losec at these prices. It's just not worth the risk. I think you're just way better off getting a better yield chip and just mining some Mexalon that is still worth more than this Isogen. But eventually, and it is going to be a slow process considering again summertime, tiny volumes at the moment, but eventually we are going to chew through all of that Isogen, and considering that there is a little bit more patience showing up in them and a bit more strategy in those sellers where they're slowly pushing that price up as a result, I do think that this is still a hold for Isogen. You know, I would have the patience and say I'm gonna keep my Isogen stocks fresh, and slowly I do think that the prices will go up, and then we should eventually see you know, it reflect something way more like Noxium, where you can see here we went from 310 130 ISK to 2000 ISK at the high point in that April rush. We're losing some of our feathers at the moment, but the premium compared to a year ago for Noxium is huge, right? 1,326 for the sellers, almost 1,300 ISK for the buyers. And so yeah, this is like a 1,000 ISK premium. That is that low SIC premium that is here, and it's probably here to stay for Noxium. And you can see that players are struggling to get more than a couple million units of Noxium on the market. Most are, you know, dive in, get a couple thousand units, get a couple 100,000 units, sell those at a price. This is worth it, right? Going into low SIC for Noxium is worth it. Going into low SIC for Isogen is not worth it yet, but eventually I do think that we will get there, right? Consumption is a part of the cycle in EVE Online, and so this is going to take a long time. But we've also mentioned this quite often in EVE Talk. I have to quickly drink for just a second. My read has always been that Isogen was basically the mineral that suffered the most from the resource bonanza. It was the one that really became a side product, and even then it was just mined in way too big volumes for the needs of the economy, and as a result we're going to need a long time to get through all of that. After that, we've got the nullsec ones with Zydrine stabilizing below 1,000 ISK. We're talking 890 for the sellers, 872 for the buyers, and Megasite is back up above 600 ISK. Definitely, I think trying to find that price range, 670 for the sellers, 576 for the buyers, way bigger margin here. I think for Megasite you do have a bit of a supply cycle where sometimes a bit of oversupply pushes the sell price below 600 ISK. Then there's a bit of, all right, let's hold off. We push us back to 620 and then it comes back. That seems to be happening with Zydrine, maybe in the hands of like fewer players with a much easier time for the sellers to dictate these sell prices, but still a little bit of pressure to do so, and so they want to get close to that 900 ISK range for Zydrine. Clearly though, the real risk money is not in nullsec, it is in lowsec, with Noxium now being the most expensive mineral in this series. You can see that as an inversion, but I do think that now we have to accept that it's going to be the new reality. As long as CCP keeps high-sec minerals to high-sec, low-sec to low-sec, and then null-sec to null-sec, the low-sec ones are going to be where you take a big risk, but you also potentially get a big reward. Finally, we've got Morphite that is continuing to hover at all-time highs. Crazy prices for Morphite, 88,640 for the sellers, 84,000 for the buyers. This is the Tech 2 economy that really needs a huge amount of Morphite. Keep one thing in mind on this one, there is no guarantee, but I did hear on one of the live streams with CCP Divs that this is something, or I think it was with the CSM, excuse me, that it was acknowledged that it's maybe something that CCP will have to look into, just the how much stuff requires Morphite compared to its availability. So if CCP comes in on this one, don't expect the same thing to happen as what we're seeing here, for instance, with Pyrite as CCP intervention, pushing prices up across the board on all of these minerals by quite a little bit here. On Morphite, honestly, a CCP intervention I think would crash the price substantially. After that, we've got the PI market, 2330. Let's take a look at these. I would say that the advanced PI materials last week surprised me by their strength, and so far here broadcast notes is kind of confirming that, hovering around 175 million. First sellers coming in at 1.6 million, but we very quickly go back above 1.7, and buyers are just above 1.6. So this is just a couple hundred units that someone wants to be sure that they can get rid of. Understandable, and this is still full recovery from a year ago. Very impressive. My read on that again is, well, there is still some capital ship production happening out there, and it requires some of this stuff. As a result, we've got stronger demand. For the refined PI materials, unfortunately, not such good news. Here it is, construction blocks back down to its low range of 7,000 ISK on average, 7.4 for the first seller, and here we, quite a bit of volumes up to 7.5 as well, 5,500 ISK for the buyers. Huge margin despite bottom prices. For the easy to make stuff, basically, we are massively oversupplied. I think now summertime may be exacerbating the situation, and this is where it becomes a difficult choice, because this may already look like a great chart, but yeah, even 5,500 disk, that's still such a huge margin compared to where the chart is at, that it's very difficult to say what you should do. Should this be a summertime investment where hopefully after the summer activity picks up and so does demand? Well, we've been here before, I'll be honest. I speculated on that a couple years ago as well, and that did not work out. So it's just a passive, easy way to produce stuff in EVE Online, and it could require a CCP revisiting PI for this to change, which I don't think is on the books all too soon. Then we've got consumer electronics kind of confirming that, yeah, we're not doing great, breaking that 6,250 barrier, so very low as well. 6,180 for the sellers, 5,900 for the buyers, and this is all there is for buyers. So we could go down very quickly here as well. This is definitely pretty crazy. We've got coolants tied to fuels, slightly different story on those, I think. Able to maintain a price above 8,000 disk, 8,500 for the seller, 7,800 for the buyers. A bit more demand, I think, partly the same story, partly the reason why I have always focused my PI setups around these fuel-rated PI materials. It's fuel, it's consumed, so there should be a slightly steadier demand and destruction for these items, but now couple more fuel blocks needed in the industry processes as well. Way more not refining, but what is it called? Can't really get onto the name. I think it's gonna be in here somewhere that we can find it. Reactions, there we go. Way more reactions added to the game, and so overall this means a little bit more fuel consumption and there's a bit more demand for these types of materials. Cryo protected solutions finally breaking down well below 100,000 ISK on the chart. Sellers below 100,000, and then 92,000 for the first buyer, 90 for the next one, 87 after that. So there is definitely a bit of pressure on cryo protected solutions. Considering these spikes tied to implant productions, definitely your chance to jump in if you want to speculate on CCP coming out with new implants. Enriched uranium tied to fuels, you can see a bit of a recovery on that, back to 10,000 ISK, and in fact, let's take a quick look at this. Considering the sellers around here were running out of enriched uranium for some reason, 11,700 for the sellers, 13,000 for the buyers. This is really the first one with a complete reverse situation. We haven't seen that in a very long time. There's not enough supply of enriched uranium, guys. Your opportunity to bring that stuff to the market at a great price. 9,000 ISK for the buyers though, that's still well below the 12,500, which I would call the historical normal price for enriched uranium. But definitely I think here, look at these volumes showing a bit more demand when it's tied to fuels. Integrity response drones still has that one weird data point, a bit of pressure on this one, but managed to hold on to 175 million for most of the time. Still 1.7 for the sellers, 162 for the buyers. Again, quite decent. Mechanical parts at 7,000 is slight uptrend in these daily averages. 7.3 to 7.6 very quickly here, so we should get to the GTA ranges. 7,600 for the sellers and 6.8 almost for the buyers. So again, you know, fuels are doing a little bit better. And then non-fuels, here are nanites that are also finally breaking down, getting very close to 1 year low point. 4.6, well below 5,000 for the sellers, 4.5 for the buyers. Same story. In fact, thank you very much for some of the response mails that I got with information on all of this stuff. Yeah, you do need nanites for implant production. So if you want to get ready for that CCP intervention, potentially, of course, we don't know, but I do expect at some point more implants to come out. Then, you know, nanites, cryoprotected solutions, these are definitely below the ranges where, you know, I've historically said that should be a buy if you want to be ready. Again, don't pour all your ISK into a gamble like that, but slowly buying now, I think, makes a lot of sense. Nano factories able to stay above 750 on the chart, 820 for the seller, 764 for the buyers. Bit of a 3,000 quantity order that is going to keep us in check here, but not that bad. Organic mortar applicators around 750 as well. just above for the sellers, just below for the buyers. Recursive computing module has that annoying data point, but stays above 1 million. 1.1 for the sellers, almost 1.1 for the buyers as well. Not bad. Robotics, finally a little bit of an upswing, but it is of course at a range that's crazy low. 62,000 for the sellers, 57,000 for the buyers. This is still way below the 100,000 ISK that I historically know robotics to sell at. And so this is our exception to the fuels. It is a specialized PI material, so it is a little bit different, but this one is still in a very bad range. Self-harmonizing power cores showing a little bit of pressure, but above 1.5, yeah, 1.6 very quickly to 1.7 million for the sellers, way above 1.5 as well for the buyers, so that's not bad. Sterile conduits, a little bit of volatility on this one, but again, 1.1 for the sellers, almost 1 million for the buyers, definitely away from the bottom range. Yukomi superconductors, slight upswing here. Volume wise, nothing special. I think it's basically drying up a little bit. 70k for the sellers, 54k for the buyers, same peak here. So again, if you can buy very low, maybe getting ready for an implant announcement, that's something that you can consider. And then finally, the wetware mainframes, bit of a recovery here. In fact, not bad. 1.7 for the sellers, just almost 1.7 for these buyers as well. So this is the same story here. I would say, let me quickly get something done here. It's pretty interesting. The industry changes have, I think, made these big ships, capital ships, way more expensive, but it also requires a lot of extra stuff, and so you're still seeing a positive impact on advanced PI. Fuel-related PI materials have a bit of a recovery just because of extra needs as well, and then the others, unfortunately, are down the drain, but that could also mean, again, that we are creating opportunities to buy very cheaply on stuff related to implants, and so that could be something to look into for the longer horizon, to try to get in on a CCP trade basically. Next up, advanced moon materials coming in at 31.50. All right, and as always, we start with the carbides. Here is crystalline carbonide, for Galente, able to stay above 200 ISK, so that premium is starting to get built in. 207 for the sellers, 200 ISK for the buyers, very expensive. Then we have for Caldari our titanium carbide that is going below 250, but that does seem to again be a bottom range, and this is interesting. If you look at what happened over the last couple of months, this could almost be a buy opportunity. 234 for the sellers, 231 for the buyers. That margin has closed very substantially, and this is really the question that you then have to ask yourself. Do you think that supplies will steadily start to decline these buy prices, or will we see what we've seen in the last couple of months, where suppliers will decide we're just gonna stop supplying, going to cause a price spike, and then of course buying now could be a great opportunity to make some risk on some more volatility. That is really the question that you have to ask yourself on whether or not you want to invest in titanium carbide right now. For Minmatar, we've got Fernite carbide that's also showing a little bit of pressure, but coming from 1 year high point of 300 ISK, I think that's kind of normal. It's 190 for the sellers, 190 for the buyers, so back below 200 ISK, but still very expensive. And then finally, tungsten carbide for Amar, back above 200. Oh, sorry about that. Back above 200 ISK with a bit of a double top above 250 here, and here we do see that pattern. Below 200, supplies dry up, so we push ourselves back up well above that. Now we're at almost 220 for the sellers, 196 for the buyers. So this is interesting. Potentially there is some trade opportunities in these advanced moon materials if this pattern holds up, of course. At least for the Galente ones, for most of them, we're definitely still paying that big premium compared to a year ago. Then for the metamaterials, we've got photonic metamaterials for Galente, making its way back to 13,000 ISK, which is actually a decently normal price. 12,800 for the sellers, 12,700 for the buyers. So I would say practically around average, decently okay price. Then we've got Caldari, where are you? Here we go. Non-linear metamaterials, still going for a big premium compared to the others, but also decently average on the chart. 22,000 for the sellers, 21,600 for the buyers. Definitely strong demand. Then we've got for Plasmonic for Minmatar, flat at 20k. Not much to say here, actually a decreasing in volatility. We're basically back where we were a year ago. 20,000 for the sellers, 19.4 for the buyers. That's interesting. And then we get Minmatar, terahertz metamaterials going back down a little bit, but again, right on the average where we started off a year ago, I would say 17.5 for the sellers, 17,000 for the buyers. Here, the Galente ones are clearly the cheapest amongst all of them, but I would say this feels like metamaterials are pretty average across the board. For the other advanced PI materials, we've got fermionic condensates, very flat at the current price range, 66 for the sellers, 65,000 for the buyers, below average. Ferrogel, alright, bit of a bounce from 35k. We are up to 37,000 for the sellers, 36,000 for the buyers. Clearly doing decently well at the moment. Bit of a surprise, I thought this pressure would start to get a stranglehold, but it's not. Then we've got Fullerites, that's more in line with what I expected, continuing to decline well below average. 850 for the sellers, so that's pretty low. I'd say 1000 disc historically is what you're looking at. Then after our spike up to 13k, the pressure is building for hypersynaptic fibers, pulling away from 10,000 disc on the downside. 9.7 for the sellers, 9.6, a little bit above that for the buyers. So narrow margin, a slow decline, but that pressure is clearly back. Nano transistors also well below 5k. So here same thing, below average I would say. Phenolic composites, and then just again phenolic composites and ceramic fibers, bit of an exception. I think with the industry changes these have more demand. 2000 ISK here for the sellers, 1700 for the buyers. And ceramic fiber, same thing, that premium, almost 500 ISK, 470 to 455 is it's just a new reality for these two items, but that pressure is also starting to show up on these, so slightly downwards. I don't see that changing honestly with summertime coming. Next up, Tech 2 ships. Let's take a look at these at 36.45. After another drink, we really got like a couple of days of 30 plus degrees Celsius, summertime all of a sudden here in Belgium. They promised us thunderstorms, we got nothing where I live, so we'll see. Next week should be a little bit better temperature wise, though a little bit more doable for me at least. And let's get started on this one. I am going to I haven't done a lot of new trading last week. Actually went out and flew a little bit, but I'll show you guys what's up. Maybe we'll just do it like that. So we're still trying to buy the Kitsune and the Osprey Navy issue. I think I bought the Prospect, or is the Endurance, I'm not really sure, one of these two. And then I did decide to sell the Zwepels, the Zwepel at a 3.5 million profit. So all of these are positive trades so far. Best one has still been the Basilisk. But yeah, let's get started. Here is the Basilisk chart showing signs of pressure. So I do think that I sold at the right time at around 230 million, including taxes. Currently selling for 243 million for the sellers, 213 in fact for the buyers. So a little bit early, but first signs of pressure. If this continues, of course, you know what I managed to buy at last time. Then we've got the Cerberus, same thing, a little bit of pressure, but not at the previous bottoms just yet. We're talking 250 million for the sellers, 230 for the buyers. That is definitely too early in my book. Then we've got the Guardian that is at a high point and is slowing. Whoops, and that's finally a little bit of wind that's coming in the house. Sorry about that again. But yeah, at the moment, Guardian in sell territory, 227 million for the sellers, 203 for the buyers, going down below 200 million very quickly. But look at this, that was definitely very tradable. So again, look out for that volatility. When it does happen, you can make some pretty amazing trades. You could have probably bought, let's see at the average prices, 190 for sure. You can sell at 227, and with a bit of luck on the buyer, I do think here for this logistics cruiser, a 30 million profit, just like on this one, was possible on this trade right here. So it's good to see with Amar, excuse me, a little bit of volatility coming back. Definitely something to keep in mind. But this one is also now under pressure, but not yet in buy territory. Then we've got the Hound, where you know, I made that trade, bought below 25, sold for 30. We're selling at 32.26, so still, you know, if you bought low, you can definitely still try to sell at the moment. And 26 million almost for the buyers is, in my opinion, a little bit too high to jump in yet again. Ichthyorsa for our Triglavian barometer, slowly edging down, but still, of course, super expensive. 865 million for a Tech 2 cruiser, almost 800 million for the buyers. It's just crazy. Then we get the Ishtar. All right, that starts to look a little bit more interesting. We're definitely declining here below the 230 million mark to 16.5 for the sellers, 202 million for the buyers. So that is getting very close on the buy side for this one. That is interesting. Definitely, potentially an opportunity. Let's take a quick look back here, for instance, at the Basilisk. So if you expect this to be like more of a technical thing rather than specific around certain circumstances, then this looks like we are on that downtrend here again. Just like here with the Basilisk, I think the Cerberus has a very similar chart right here, where we got close to this one, and that was another buy opportunity. This to me does read like if you can grab an Ishtar as close as possible to 200 million ISK, then you are looking at a potentially very good purchase. Then we've got the Manticore continuing to slowly edge down below 30 million, but I would love us to touch 25 million on the chart before we decide to jump in. And yeah, look at that, 28.5 million for the sellers, 23 million for the buyers. And this means that I was too early, right? I bought a Manticore for less than 27 million, including taxes. So this can happen as well, right? Where I thought, all right, we're breaking below 30 here, and look at this bit of the chart. I had to look back a little bit more, go back to this one, and buying below 25 million would have been a more prudent move, which, as it turns out, was entirely possible. But I guess that it's this slight uptick here that said to me, oh, we may be stalling already, better try to get that purchase going. So this happens as well. I was a little bit too early on the Manticore, which means that potentially if we get back to 35, I'll have a profit, but definitely less than what is potentially possible. So yeah, that Manticore is in a great place as well, in my opinion. If you look at this from this chart perspective, you're buying down here. Chart can definitely reach that. And then last time, just like with Basilisk, Cerberus, we can potentially see a bounce in that. Very, very cool looking charts, to be honest, if you're looking to actively trade. Then here we get the Munin. This one I'm a little bit less giddy on. It's definitely also still right around the middle of the chart. 252 for the sellers, 215 for the buyers. Yeah, honestly, actually here is the 230. So this is the decision that you have to make, right? We had a pull up from this range before, and you can definitely buy below 230 at the moment. Or is this the real trigger where 200 million and below is a buy? That's if you want to be certain, basically. So you could be just like with the Manticore, too early, or this could be the right time to buy. It's very difficult to say. Then we get the Nemesis, unfortunately still hovering around that 25 million mark, below 23 for the buyers. But yeah, I would love to see us be a little bit lower before I decide to pull the trigger. All Nero's flat at 200 million, same story, 181 for the buyers. So this is starting to open up. You could maybe try to buy an All Nero's at the moment, but then on this one, of course, 20 a day is maybe the average, the high average. So keep in mind, it's very difficult to make that happen. And then the Panther, will revisit that one for the extra product. We'll take a look at all the advanced battleships. But yeah, TCP announcing the Black Ops change, making these ships way more useful in nullsec. And as a result, these are going for 1.6 billion, 1.5 for the buyers. This is that CCP effect that I was talking about. If you remember in PI, on an implant announcement, those PI investments could see something like that happen as well. The Purifier back down, so this one maybe starts to be interesting. Let's take a look at the price ranges. 29 million still for the sellers, 24.2 million for the buyers. So you're buying below 25 million. it could already be an interesting one to look into as well. Yeah, I'd say Purifier looks interesting, Manticore looks interesting, I was early, Ishtar looks interesting. There's definitely opportunities, I think, in the Tech 2 market at the moment. Scimitar still slowly under pressure, but nothing where I would say, yeah, this get rid of this one, buy her at 200 million, and you can look into investing, but that's going to take a little bit more supply. Then the Widow CCP effect again, currently costing 1.6 billion, buyers at 1.25. And then the Zealot is going back down substantially as well, below 200 million, 215 for the sellers, 195 for the buyers. Yeah, maybe as well if you're looking for that Zealot trade, but keep then one thing in mind again. Sometimes there's like one or two that sell, so this is not a big volume trade either, but some opportunities do exist here. I'll take the opportunity to quickly look at these. So Kitsune, you can see on the chart why I tried to buy, but yeah, people came in at 21 million. I'm holding on. Hopefully at some point in the next 3 months, we get another oversupply situation where I can try to get my buy order taken care of, but that can happen as well. And then the Osprey Navy issue, well, we're seeing the pressure back. So try to buy for 63 including taxes, people coming in at 65 million, still needs a little bit of work, but we could potentially, I think, if the Caldari can keep up with their faction warfare efforts, and perhaps when their celebration comes around, we could get that happen. Then maybe my Osprey Navy issue trade can happen. Then Confessor bought at 35, currently selling for 42. Would definitely love to get back above 45 before I sell. Endurance bought below 19.5 and currently selling at 22. That's not enough profit. Manticore, we saw that. I'm a little bit too early on that, so no profits there at this point. And then the Prospect bought for 21, currently selling for 21, so that's continued pressure here as well. But we'll keep a close eye on these. And so the trade for last week, I decided to trade on the Zwepel, and oh, don't tell me I was early. Oh yes, I was early. I basically lost patience, and I decided, you know what, I still have a 3.5 million. We were just starting this upswing right here. I think I noticed that inflection point right at the start, and so I sold at 44.5. Turns out I was early. I could have sold for 10 million more. God damn it. We'll take a look at the Tech 3 ship market right now. But yeah, those were my trades. Let's move on to the Tech 3 ships coming in at 46.50. As always, let's take a look at the destroyers. Here is the Confessor, which is basically why I think I also decided to put up a buy order. I brought a Confessor at 35 million, but also decided to pull the trigger on a small profit for the Zwepel. It's just more pressure. 42 million for the sellers now, 39 million for the buyers. So you're not gonna match my buy price, but that's all converging. Supply-wise, it's finally drying up. But yeah, that push down is quite significant. Then we get the Hecate. You can see that trend continuing here as well towards 45 million. Far more reasonable, of course, in my opinion. 46 million for the sellers, 43 million for the buyers. Supply-wise, half a page, no, a little bit more than half a page, but this is in line with the sell price and should be able to stabilize. Then we've got the Jackdaw, and yeah, this is not good news. Back below 45 million, 45 for the sellers, 42 for the buyers. Supply-wise, still a full page, including 50 of them here. Demand drying up a little bit. If you look at this in context, you would expect more pressure on the Zwepel as well. So I decided to take my profit, but no, the Zwepel, big volumes, complete dry up of the sellers, and we are at 55 million currently for the sellers. Now this gap will be plugged very quickly. I expect this to give a little bit of breathing room to the Confessor, Hecate, and the Jackdaw. So hopefully if the Confessor can get a little bit volatile, you can see that supply here is drying up, then this trade could become profitable. But this is not what I expected. We've been able to play with that just below 50 million range on all the others for so long. I thought that was the trend, but clearly now we're caught I think in the summer slump for the destroyers, which has probably brought back demand quite a little bit. And so we're probably looking at more of a 45 million range, which overall though I think is very interesting information, not good for my trades, but it does show that seasonal changes can also become very profitable ones once you calculate them correctly in your reads on the market. So yeah, at the moment, hopefully that works out. I'm mostly, of course, now keeping an eye on the confessor, but that's a surprise jump here for the Zwepel. Unfortunately, I did not take advantage on that one. So sometimes you can be too early, basically, too early on my Manticore buy, too early on my Zwepel sell. For the cruisers, here is the Legion chart, still very flat above 180. 180 for the sellers, 173 for the buyers. I wonder how you get these average prices then, but all right. Then we've got the Loki flat just above 180 as well. Over the last week or so, 180 for the sellers, 161 for the buyers. Bought for 161, sold for 176. So this is almost a tradable range right here. But I would obviously wait for a serious pullback before I try to buy. It's going to be very difficult at the moment. Proteus settling, at least finally this is logical compared to the Legion and the Loki. I think way more popular than the Proteus. So 171, 10 million less, 156 for the buyers. That seems like it's where it should be. And then the Tengu is actually going down below 180. Also 176 for the sellers, 164 for the buyers. Does make sense to me. If this had more legs, then maybe I would risk a buy, but right now it's definitely too early. I don't see any gambles to make in the Tech 3 cruisers at the moment. So yeah, pretty interesting in my opinion, and I think I'm not sure how. Let me know in the comments what you would prefer when it comes to my own buy orders, holdings, sell orders and things like that. How you would prefer that I keep you guys up to date on that one. Maybe completely at the end of EVE Talk, maybe once we hit the first Tech 2 ship segment or something like that. I'm still not sure. We'll see. But I've been trading a little bit more, and so there's definitely more stuff to talk about on that part as well. But let's get to that extra category, battleships and advanced battleships, coming in at 5120. Like that, and we'll actually start with the Black Ops battleships for the CCP effect. So here is the Redeemer. CCP announces that changes are on CC. These guys can now take up to 30 ships. That has changed from the mass test with them into a jump, into a Sino conduit or something like that. Not exactly sure what the name is, but that's caused a massive volume spike, which brought the price up above 2 billion for a little bit. We're recovering decently well, 1.6 billion for the sellers, 1.3 for the buyers, but I do think this will mean increased demand and usage. Widow, we saw that as well, went to almost 2 billion-isk, currently 1.6 for the sellers, but this one, a little bit less demand, below 1.3. For the Sin, then we went to, again, yeah, almost the 2 billion range. We're at 1.5 billion for the sellers and 1.15 billion for the buyers. So here we could expect a very quick full recovery. And then the Panther, that one again almost 2 billion, currently at 1.6, above 1.6 billion, and buyers still at almost 1.5 billion. And here the question is going to be, I would say, will these changes cause a lot more usage of these Black Ops battleships and also a lot more losses of them? So should we see just a premium price because of that to stay? Or, which is what the Galente one at least seems to indicate to, it's such a niche gameplay anyways that the buyers will go back to and the sellers will go back to basically what it costs to produce these ships, and then this could end up becoming a net pretty much stable situation from just a couple of months ago. But the impact of that one, right, a couple of months ago, you can see that was still, if I look for instance at the Widow, 1 billion, and then up to above 1.25 billion. That is the impact of something that is here to stay because of the Marauders, of course. And we'll take a quick look at these. These have been buffed substantially, way better, I think, now missioning ships compared to like even the Rattlesnake. I think they blow them out of the water. And so here the Paladin is still costing 1.9 billion ISK, buyers coming in at 1.5 billion. So this is a CCP announcement here to stay. For the Black Ops battleships, this could be a CCP announcement that gets back down to normal prices pretty quickly. The Golem, a bit of pressure at the tail end, but still that premium, you're paying almost 1.9 billion for the sellers, 165 for the buyers. Then the Kronos, also a bit of pressure at the end, but 1.7 billion for the sellers, 1.5 for the buyers, and here we were at 1 billion just before the announcement, so clearly a much higher range. And then the Varger, very stable at its premium as well, 1.85 billion for the sellers, 1.73 billion for the buyers. So if you're still here, I would love to know your thoughts on the Black Ops changes. Do you think that we're looking at a new higher range, or do you think that these will correct back to that 1 to 1.25 billion range, maybe a little bit higher than that, of course, considering how much more expensive the Marauders are, how much more material they take in, but I honestly think that this will be a short-lived spike. I don't see these guys go for 1.8 billion consistently for very long, for instance. So yeah, there you go. That's the advanced product for the week, the advanced battleships, and that was EVE Talk this week. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.